Hi there, welcome to my workshop. We are here in Austin, Texas. I'm Jacqueline Hummel of Texas Provincial, and today I'm going to be taking you through the refinishing of this really cute little chest of drawers that I just picked up right here. I've already taken off the hardware, and really all I need to do next is cut out some pieces to replace a couple parts of this drawer frame that we're missing, and then do a little bit more preparation and then move on to paint. So let's get started. As you can see here, there is a missing piece, and this little piece really stops the front of the drawer from sliding all the way back. And this piece enables the front of the face of the drawer to sit flush with the outside of the frame and all of the other drawers. So this is going to be pretty important to have. This is also pretty easy to fix. All I'm going to do is cut out some wood and replace it. I'm using a little jigsaw to cut out the wood stops because personally it's the saw I feel most comfortable using. It's light, easy to operate, and can get a variety of small jobs done. Once all the structural issues have been fixed, I prepare my pieces for sanding by wiping them down with mineral spirits. I've got my fan on just to move the fumes through the shop and out the door. And I'm going to start by getting a rag full of mineral spirits here. And you're going to want to wear gloves usually. I should be wearing gloves right now. These aren't too harsh, but you're going to want to wash your hands pretty quickly afterwards. Wipe off the piece. As you can see, you're going to be getting dust and grime. At this point, I am ready to start sanding the top. I've already actually gotten started, sorry, a little bit before I even decided to shoot this video. So some of what you're seeing here is already been sanded down. Obviously the lighter parts have been sanded down. But for the sake of demo, I'm just going to keep going with it just so you can see this tool in use. This is my orbital sander, and I love it so much. It is a Festool RO90, and it's by far the most expensive and I guess professional tool I have in my shop. You do not need this kind of equipment. You can go out and spend under $100, you know, depending on what your project is, and buy some orbital sander or some sanding solution that will work for you. I had a piece that was just giving me a lot of trouble. Just a regular orbital sander just wasn't cutting it, and so I went ahead and spent the money and bought this thing, and it's just the best money I've ever spent. I love it. So biggest awesomeness here is this hose hookup. Sucks up all the dust. There's actually a little vacuum built into this so that as I'm sanding, the dust is getting sucked up and it goes straight into my shop vac, which is so cool. With any sander, be sure not to put any extra weight on it as you sand. Pressing down will only wear down the motor, and it'll ultimately shorten the lifespan of your equipment. Okay, so you would really just continue with that until you felt like your piece was ready in terms of smooth, and it was just ready for that final hand sand. And that is what I'm going to do next, is just take a sanding block, hand sand this part out that I just finished sanding with the orbital, and that way we can get rid of those little squigglies. Alrighty, so I've got my sanding block, and I'm just going to come down. Okay, so you can see there's just some buildup in here, and that happens. At this point, I actually feel okay about this so far, so I'm just going to dust this off, and then I'm going to wipe some mineral spirits over it to just make sure that I've gotten all of those little marks out. Yeah. I'm not saying anything super obvious here, so I'm actually pretty comfortable with that. What I usually do is, so on the orbital sander, I had 120 grit paper on there. And whenever I'm hand sanding out those little squigglies, sometimes they can be super stubborn. So what I do is I come down one grit below whatever the lowest grit that I was using on the orbital sander, and then I start the sanding block there. So I was using 120 on the orbital, and I just grabbed some 100 grit sandpaper, put that on the block, and then sanded it down. And that will usually, if you work your way up from there, you will usually get out the majority of those squiggly marks. So one thing you're going to want to do is always sand, let me scoop this over. Always sand in the direction of the grain of the wood. Don't go opposite. That's going to be not a good result. Okay, so at this point, this has been sanded down. Just a little hand sanding is all you need. And now I've got to come back through with my trusty mineral spirits and just clean off all of this dust. Now that we are finally done with all of the prep work, it is time for my favorite part, and that's paint. So what I'm going to start off with is, I've got my favorite chalk paint here, which is what I'm going to be using. This is Pure and Original. I don't know if you can see that. Pure and Original. This is their Classico line, which is their chalk paint line. And this is the best paint I have ever painted with, just hands down. I've tried everything out there, including the Annie Sloan paint. This is just really velvety. It's very, chalk paint usually has some sort of a plaster in it, which is why it's so great for painting on previously finished surfaces. That plaster is going to enable you to, it's going to enable the paint to stick, even though you're not painting on, bare wood. I'm going to start at the top here. When you're painting, you're going to want to go with the grain of the wood, kind of like you would if you were sanding. That's just a good rule of thumb. You can break that rule of thumb for sure, because sometimes paint techniques can differ. It just depends on what kind of look you're going for. And this is just not working. Okay, I think you can see me. Okay, so I've done a little bit of adjusting here because I cannot get this camera angle right. But I'm coming through with Atria first, and I'm just gonna start at the top here, and then I'm going to move down, and I'm gonna try to do a little bit of a gradient. I'm gonna move from Atria through to the Greek sky, and then from there I'm gonna go into the berries. And I have a pretty limited amount. I think this should work just because this chalk paint in general, it goes a long way. So I'm just gonna get started and kind of risk it. So let's just do this here. Hopefully you can see me. My brushes I get on Amazon. I look for the reviews where people have cited that the bristles fall out the least. That's my #1 pet peeve. It just happens so often, and it's just the biggest roadblock, because when you're painting, the last thing you want is to have to fish something out, a little bristle out, and then ruin, you know, the little finish that you're working on. Sometimes it can be really distracting, and then definitely at the beginning of the piece it's okay, but then as you move on through and you're starting to near completion, that can be really annoying to peel back layers of paint just to pull out one little bristle. So I always try to find brushes that have reviews of really just good bristles. I just dip my paint in some Greek Sky, and I'm gonna just start here with it. And then I'm gonna blend back up. And then I'm gonna come down with a little bit of Atria. I'm not washing my brush in between dipping into the paint can. It just doesn't bother me to do that, just because I'm not, it's not really contaminating the paint that much, and I don't have that much paint to contaminate anyway. So it's really up to you, whatever your comfort level is as far as mixing colors or not mixing colors. You can switch brushes if you want. I do sometimes, but most of the time, if I'm just feeling it, I'll just go with it. So dipping my brush back into the Greek Sky, which is this little kind of purpley color, and I'm going to work it right through on top of the Atria greenish color that I just painted on. That way I'm kind of blending the two. Just kind of start below to get the unload the bulk of that paint on my brush. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and stop, take a step back, and then decide what to do next. Kind of, no, that's not. Okay, so after a lot of going back and forth, this is where I ended up with my piece. There's a lot of construction going on in the back, so really sorry. Hopefully you can still hear me over it. I ended up I kept my Atria color, and then I kept my Greek Sky, but what I did instead of the berries below is I took my very favorite color, steel blue, and I pulled this all through here so that I got a nice gradient from top to bottom, and this hardware polished up amazing. The hardware really helped me in terms of figuring out what direction I wanted to go in terms of paint. It was going to be, I figured out it was going to be this really beautiful gold, and so I wanted to make sure that there was enough contrast between the paint and the hardware that it really stood out and made the piece look super elegant. And I think that was achieved here. I really love this color combination, and so that's really all there is to it. Just pick your paint and then start. After sealing with a coat of General Finishes High Performance Top Coat, this piece is ready for its next chapter. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more projects by subscribing to my channel. See you next time!